Hello class and welcome to Chapter 2, Human Resource Management. Today we're going to talk about the evolution of traditional HR, traditional human resource management, into strategic human resource management, or what's otherwise known as SHRM. Let's get started. It's important to note that every successful company has a strategy. A strategy in its most basic explanation is a plan which reveals to the organization what they're going to do, where they're going to go, how they're going to get there, and why. Plans can range from 1 year to 3 years or 10 or more years, depending on how strategically focused that organization is. Needless to say that top management, the C-level individuals within the organization, that's Chief Marketing Officer, CMO, CIO, CFO, the CEO, they all work together to form a strategic strategy for the company. Very commonly, you have the functional heads of every major department within the organization participating in the overall development and execution of that strategy. So it's very common to see the CEO lay out an overall strategic vision. The marketing department comes in and says, here's how we're going to fulfill that vision. The finance department comes in and says, here's how we're going to fulfill that vision. The IT department likewise, and so on and so forth. Traditionally, the HR department has not been involved in that process. They've been thought of as more of an after fact. And we'll kind of look at what we need in terms of human resources or people after a while. But for right now, the HR department is a cost center, and we don't see the strategic value in the HR department. That's been the historical view of human resources, and that view is changing. Human resource professionals have been working very hard over the last 30 plus years to change how other departments and C-level executives view their function. They want these executives to understand that HR does have a strategic value and a strategic place within the organization. And yes, while they may represent a huge cost center for the organization, they also can represent areas for significant cost savings and perhaps even revenue generation. So whenever it comes to building a strategy, the traditional major flagship departments in an organization are consulted and considered necessary as part of that strategy. Now, when you're dealing with an organization that has 500, 1,000, and in some cases many thousands of employees, the strategic planning process is not just write down your plan on a sheet of paper. You could do that if you're a sole proprietor or you have maybe 1 or 2 people in your organization. But when you're talking about a large organization, you need to have a more formalized process which outlines the steps that are involved in creating the strategic plan and gathering the information and data necessary for a strategic plan to be developed by senior management. That's what we call the strategic planning process. It's all the steps and procedures that go into developing the strategic plan and propagating that plan throughout the organization so people can execute on it. So what we're seeing now is a greater emphasis from the HR department to get the other departments to recognize their strategic value. The fact that the HR department can begin to speak the same language that the other departments speak when it comes to return on investment, productivity, and other types of metrics to show the value that the department is creating or delivering to the overall organization. This evolution from traditional management to strategic HR management, from traditional HR management to strategic HR management, is what we call SHRM, or Strategic HR Management, SHRM being the acronym. And we're going to take a look on this chart here at some of the functions that traditional HR engages in and the functions that strategic HR engages in. I'm not going to go through every bullet on this list. It will make the slide presentation way too long, but I'll pull out a couple key ones. Big thing to notice, the big point to notice here is that traditional HR, which is represented by this column right here, focuses on things that we think of every day as HR. So we're talking about hiring people, head count, salary, cost, and other basic day-to-day HR functions. Strategic HR, on the contrary, focuses on things that are a bit more broad, a bit more strategic, and have greater value and impact to the organization. So you can see here, traditional HR focuses on micro or small topics. Strategic HR focuses on macro or large-scale, broad topics that will affect the overall organization, such as strategic planning. Coming up with measurements to show how their programs help to reduce costs across the organization or improve productivity. One of the biggest costs that organizations face is that for employees. specifically when you're hiring employees. It costs money to go out and hire and recruit new employees. If we were able to retain employees more, that means we wouldn't have to go out and hire as many people. So if our turnover ratio was higher, we're spending less money going out trying to attract new talent. That money translates directly to the bottom line and helps the organization be more productive. So when I talk about measurements or metrics, these are some of the metrics that we are referring to when it comes to HR. We also look at the long-term or risk planning. Today is a very litigious society, so if we're able to put in certain practices or procedures in the organization now, those procedures may help save us from very expensive and costly lawsuits down the road. So how do we measure that? How do we show that value to the other departments within the organization? These are some of the challenges that the HR department is facing as it becomes more strategically focused. There are four major components that the HR department has to address in a strategic thinking. One is they have to understand the business. So you're going beyond just understanding how to hire people or attract good talent or to use the company's brand to attract good quality people into the organization. You have to understand the business, the product lines, the business strategy, the client base. The more the HR department understands the business, the easier it is for them to deliver enhanced value to the company. They have to focus on business goals. Now, this is a big part of any strategic plan. The CEO lays out the goals that must be achieved, and the other departments set out how they're going to go about achieving to reach those goals. The HR department needs to act in the same way. They need to understand what are the key goals that we're focusing on over the next 12 months, and then say, here's what HR can do to help make those goals reachable, or to help empower other departments to reach the goals. They have to know what to measure. And this can get very tricky because a lot of the things associated with HR are intangible. They're difficult to quantify and place measurements on. But somehow the HR department has to develop metrics, and they have done this. You'll see this in later slides. They have developed metrics to measure their performance, and those metrics tie into the overall profitability of the organization. So we have to measure those on a regular basis and show that there's progress being made and how that progress translates into greater profitability for the organization. Additionally, the HR department has to show how they're future oriented, how they're going to continue to work every year to drive down costs or increase productivity when it comes to the human resources, when it comes to the people within the organization. To this extent, you've seen the emergence of several high performance practices. One, the HR department offers incentive compensation. You'll find this in most middle management jobs and above. You'll find it very commonly in sales positions where people's productivity is directly tied to their pay. So the more productive you are, the more money you'll be able to make. Training and development. This is a huge area where organizations can improve performance. If the employees knew more, they were better trained, they could operate more efficiently, then they're able to be more productive and drive greater productivity and revenue to the organization. Employee participation. There's a whole school of research that talks about when a person or a group of people are involved in the decision making, that they tend to buy into the solutions that are created and thereby exert greater effort toward the successful outcomes of that solution. So to this extent, HR explores ways that employees can participate in decision making. They can participate in the development of their own schedules. They can participate in activities that will affect their job and thereby offer their insights as to how to make the jobs more productive. Selectivity in hiring. We can't really get any more specific than hiring the right people into the right jobs. When you hire the wrong person into a job, the cost is exponentially more than just leaving that job vacant. So HR continues to work on ways that they can hire the right people, identify them, select them, properly pay them, and get them into the company with a great, smooth onboarding process. What you've seen very commonly here is flexible job arrangement. Many organizations offer varying work schedules for people to come in. As a matter of fact, I know someone who's working at a traditional corporate job, but because she has small children, they actually let her work from home part of the week. So part of the week she's in the office and part of the week she's able to work from home. This gives her greater flexibility to manage her personal life while feeling that the organization cares about her, so she exerts a greater effort towards her job and therein increases productivity. These are just a handful of high-performance work practices that HR departments have engaged in. When it comes to developing a strategy or executing on a strategy that's given to you from the CEO, environmental scanning is a very important part. What environmental scanning refers to is a tendency for people in that department to look both inside and outside the organization for activities, trends that may affect how well the company can execute on its strategy. Here are a couple key areas that you look at or you keep a close eye on to see how they're changing, they're evolving, and assess whether they will affect the organization or not. Political and legislative issues. Last year or a couple years ago, when Obama passed a law about health care, this had a huge impact on many organizations, especially small organizations with more than 50 employees. They may not have been offering health care, but now they were required to, and this represents a huge cost for those organizations. So if you're in the HR department, you need to be looking at these political and legislative issues like this and many others. Now that we have a new president in the office, those legislative issues are likely to change, and organizations need to understand them, embrace those changes should they be something that's going to cost more money, or exploit them if they're going to be something that could help them save greater money. Economic conditions, huge impact on the organization, especially from an HR perspective. When we say economic issues, we're referring to the overall state of the economy. Are you in a recession? Are we in a strong or a bullish market? These have direct implications on your ability to hire people and the availability of skills within the marketplace. Geographical and competitive concerns, absolutely very important. Your competition are seeking the same employees that you're seeking. They're branding themselves as a great place to work. You need to make sure your company is doing the same. Demographic changes. When we talk about demographics, we're talking about major shifts within the population. I'll give you a couple examples. The baby boomers are growing older and they're increasingly retiring. So within the next 10 to 15 years, we're going to have a mass exodus of people from the workforce. And unfortunately, these people have been around for a long time. They're in senior management positions. They're very knowledgeable, very skilled, and they're going to be retiring. That's going to leave a lot of vacancies in our corporations. Well, who's going to fill them? HR needs to be planning for these types of changes and eventualities now before they hit full scale to the organization. Another demographical shift would be the changing in the ethnic diversity within American society. They say by the year 2050 that white Americans will then be the minority. There'll be more people of color in America than there are white individuals. So with that said, organizations have to embrace this change in the diversity. The fastest growing ethnic group within America is the Hispanic group. So what does this mean for organizations? What does this mean for our language issues, or talking with our customers and clients, policies and procedures? Are there different value systems that the Hispanic audience has as a culture that need to be more recognized by organizations if we're going to have productive employees? These are things that the HR department must understand and be planning for. So it's all a part of environmental scanning, and we feed that information and insights into our strategic plans. It's another important concept that's called succession planning, and that HR has to be aware of and have effective plans in place as well. Succession planning refers to the identification of people or a person who will step into a role should a key role become vacant unexpectedly. Let's say, for example, we have a person in a senior management role, a vice president role, and they're very critical to the organization. All of a sudden, they die, they have a heart attack. So we, just lost a great deal of knowledge and experience within the organization, but we also lost the leadership. That department must still continue to function, the sales must continue to come on, the product launch must still happen. How are we going to ensure continuity of the organization when select key members who are critical to the company are no longer with the company, and it happens in a very abrupt manner? That's what succession planning is all about. You recognize these as issues. You recognize it as a very important issue, and you begin to develop a plan that can be put in place should that position become unexpectedly vacant. So you may have a backup person that you'll automatically plug into that role, or several backup people, or a quick hiring process that you've already got laid out and that immediately kicks in as soon as that person is no longer there. One of the most obvious and well-known succession plans that most everyone in America is familiar with is that of the President of the United States. If the president were to pass away unexpectedly, or something were to happen and becomes incapacitated or unable to fulfill the responsibilities of his office, how do we ensure the continuity of the government? Well, the vice president immediately takes over as the president. Well, what happens if both the president and the vice president were hurt and affected? Well, then the Speaker of the House steps in, and so on from there. So That's an example of a succession plan. That wraps it up for this lecture. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to email them, or if we're meeting physically for class, bring them to class. Thank you, and you have a good day.